Okay, first delete the camera, the light and the default cube. Now go to add mesh and add a cone. Make sure it's tall because this is gonna be our leaf part, so which is gonna be tall. Make sure you have at least 7 to 9 vertices. Okay, if you want the view to look a bit more, you can do what I just did. Pull it up a little, and okay, now we are gonna go into edit mode and use the knife tool. You can just drag across the screen to make a slice, and when your start point and your end point meets, you can press enter and it will make a slice out of it. This is gonna give you that handmade feel for the leaves, instead of using the loop tool and going all around and doing this using vertices. This is a much easier way. Okay, once that's done, make a loop cut just below every knife cut you made and select the whole ring using the edges and just decrease its size, just like this, just what I'm doing right now. Okay, see, it's starting to look like the tree we're trying to make. Okay, so repeat these steps one by one. Okay, here I'm gonna speed up the video. Make sure to have a larger tree trunk on the bottom, and as you go up, make it narrower and narrower. Okay, now you can select all the edges like this, and then what we're gonna do is drag it up a little. In that way, it's starting to look like what we need. I'm gonna show you this again. Just look at this. Okay, now we're almost done, but we realize that our top bit is a bit too tall, just like this bit, so we need to reduce its height. In the meantime, what we're gonna do is make a couple of more loop cuts right here, not loop cuts, knife cuts right here, so that we can break it up into much easier segments. Okay, now we're gonna select the top bit. Okay, so if your knife cut has problems, you can simply select those points using the vertices and fix them. Okay, select the top bit and reduce its height. Okay, now let us step back. It's starting to look like a pine tree, a low poly pine tree. Okay, so we are halfway there. So select the face and the bottom face, select the bottom face and select inset, and then you are going to use the extrude tool. Yes, just like that. Use the extrude tool to make a couple of extrudes and make the tree trunk bigger. Okay, you can easily add more loop cuts to it so that it looks a lot better. Okay, play around with the loop cut and placement of the joints and everything. Move them around a little, move the edges around a little, so that it looks natural, because nature isn't that symmetric. Nature it's asymmetric, but if you have put in some imperfections, it will look handmade. Okay, it will not look like a robot has made it. Alright, so once that's done, we put in a couple of more loop points. Look at what I'm doing. I'm just making it look a bit more nicer. Okay, alright, then we are done. We're almost okay. So there, so increase the ambient occlusion and you can see a nice shadow. Okay, let's adjust the size a little. Alright, we're done. Now apply the scale. Okay, this is very important, otherwise the texture gonna get messed up. So go to UV editing and in edit mode select all the faces and UV unwrap it. Okay, once we increase the ambient occlusion, we can see that it's starting to look like a lot better actually. Okay, so now what we need to do is go into our material and create a material. So we're gonna first use a material called leaves green, which is just gonna be green. Okay, this is gonna be our base material, so we are just gonna select the green. Okay, now we have a green material, and then we're gonna add another material for the trunk. Okay, go into edit mode, go into face mode, double click on the edges to select, shift select all those edges and the bottom, and click your trunk brown, and then give it a brown color, and then click assign, and then there you have it. Now our tree is complete and is looking game ready, but it's not, because now the problem is we have two textures and one game asset. Roblox wants one texture and one game asset, so we need to bake this right now. So we're gonna show you how we can bake this. Okay, go into render settings, and by default Blender uses Eve. So what we're gonna do is select our model and then go into our shading tab. In the shading tab, press a space or tab depending on which configuration you're using, and add a image node. Okay, and name it baked image. So 1024 by 1024 is okay. Press 32-bit float so that the precision is a lot better, and that's all we need to do. Make sure you have this image node on both the materials, and then move to your render engine and select cycles instead of Eve. Once you do that, you will see a bake option there. All you need to do is select diffuse and uncheck mark the direct and indirect. These are lights, we don't need them. All we need is the color. So once we do that, once that's done, just select bake, and it will start baking our materials into a single image. Okay, quick note here: if you see only one of your materials, for example in our case the trunk has been baked into an image but not the leaves, that means I have made a mistake in the shading tab where I did not have the image texture node in both the materials. So I'm gonna do that. The reason why I'm showing you this is one of the main reasons many people complain the bake doesn't work in Blender. So go into your shading tab, do the UV again, do the UV correctly, and increase the seams a little so that they don't overlap, just like I did right here. And then go into your materials tab again, shading tab right here, just like this, and see this image texture. You need to add this to both your materials. For example, you can see the trunk has this node but the leaves doesn't. So what we do, we give it an image texture and select the image, our baked image, which means both these materials will now be baked into that same baked image file. Okay, same as before, go into render settings and go into bake and start baking. Make sure you are in object mode and not in edit mode, otherwise bake won't work. Okay, once it's finished baking, this is what our baked UV map looks like, which means the texture for the image. UV is same as X and Y, UV. Okay. Alright, so once that's done, now what we need to do is export this image into a file. Click on the image at the very top and save as it to a location where you are going to export the OBJ file later for the game engine. Okay, I suggest creating a new folder and everything. Okay, so once you are there, name it whichever you want and say diffuse material. Now what we're going to do is go into our render settings again and go into bake and select ambient occlusion on render type. In this way we can also create the shadows baked into the image on the same image as this. Okay, so once that's done, you can use this ambient occlusion image in Unreal Engine and Unity, and in also I think very soon in Roblox as well. But for now what we want is Roblox to use a texture and the ambient occlusion baked into the same texture, a single texture. So let's do that. But before that, let's export our project. Let's export the OBJ file and bring it into Roblox and see what the asset looks like without the embedded shadows or the ambient occlusion. So now We're going to save the obj file and open it in some other program like the Paint 3D application by Microsoft and we can see that it works. Okay, so go into your Roblox and add a mesh part by clicking on the plus button on the workspace and then selecting our image, selecting our object. Once that's done, you can see that Roblox has successfully imported the tree into our scene. Okay, right now we cannot see it, but if we frame it, we can see it. Okay, alright, so this is Roblox giving and its own lighting, giving it the shadows it needs. Okay, it has some shadows but not as pronounced as we are going to make it. Okay, so just as a size reference, I'm bringing my own character in Roblox so that you can see the tree is very small. So hold shift and enlarge it and make it an actual tree size or any size you want. You can actually duplicate it and create an entire forest of these things for your game engine. It's low poly, so there is no problem with it. Okay, now let's bake our ambient occlusion the same way. So I have two image nodes, one for the diffuse map or the color map and one for the ambient occlusion. Two image nodes, and create a mix RGB node and select multiply and apply it to the base color. What this is gonna do is have our own shadows. Right now we can see the shadows are not that pronounced. Make sure you are on multiply. Okay, give it a bit of time for the rendering to work in viewport shading mode, and once that's done, what we can do is disable the ambient occlusion in Eve so that we can check that our texture is actually being applied. You can use the flag control like this to see the shadows. We are going to bake these shadows into the image right now. Same as before, go into render settings, select cycles and select bake. Right now we are going to use the diffuse material option because our ambient occlusion is gonna get rendered into the diffuse map anyway. Once that's done, make sure to delete all the materials and create a new material and just apply that single image we are going to export. Now that baking has finished, we can see the green leaves and everything has that shadow or the ambient occlusion built in. Go into your object mode and in material mode apply this material. Go into material and have just one material and use as base color and just bring this material in. That's about it. Right now we are going to export this texture as JPG or PNG, whichever you prefer, and make it work on the same mesh on Roblox, because Roblox allows us to export mesh and texture separately. So you can have the same mesh but different textures, which allows you to create seasons and many different variations of the same mesh. Okay, just like before, go into image and save this image as anything you like. Name it, for example, diffuse AO base, and then go into our Roblox Studio and select any of the trees, and on our inspection window on the right, on the bottom, there is something called texture ID. Clicking on the texture ID will allow you to choose a file. So let's go to our location. Okay, now we're going to select the ambient occlusion generated diffuse map that we just made using Blender and select that. Once it's selected, the file is going to get uploaded to the Roblox server and it will propagate into your system just in a minute. Give it time. Okay, don't be impatient, and once it's done you can see the change. After a bit of time, you can see the image has been applied and it looks great with the shadows. Those trees in the back doesn't have the shadows baked in, and this one has. So you can see a dramatic change in your scene. So good luck with your projects, and if you want, I will give a link to it in the description of this exact asset in the Roblox asset space. Thank you. I hope you like this tutorial, and if you subscribe, I'll promise you to bring more content. And hopefully if you have a well lit scene, this will look like this. So good luck with your project, and thank you.